you're negotiating with either a lender, a seller, a broker, basically anybody, you have to be willing to walk away. Neediness is so unattractive. It positions you in a very low place on the totem pole. Positioning yourself as a qualified buyer and really diving into their network, into their pipeline of deals. And BizBuySell gives you access to thousands of brokers across the country in any number of industries. So I think BizBuySell is probably the very best tool out there. How did you educate yourself about buying businesses before making your first acquisition? The answer is Dan Pena. I studied Dan Pena's content voraciously and then paid the better part of $20,000 to go study under him. Spent 7 days at his castle. It was quite a unique event. He's a pretty intense guy. He had a lot of good insights. I also think some of the things he taught me were outdated, but that's how I got introduced into the buying business process using leveraged finance. Number 2, how did you identify potential businesses for acquisition? What industries or markets did you focus on and why? I got some great advice from a professor at NYU who was also an investor, who told me, hey, young man, if you want to find a good deal, don't look in Los Angeles, don't look in New York City. It's too competitive. You need to go into a second or third tier market where there's less buyers and more opportunity for somebody who's aggressive to get their foot in the game. And that's exactly why I ended up looking for deals in Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and ultimately closed on a business acquisition in Skyler, Nebraska, some town in the middle of the plains in the United States that nobody's heard of, but it proved to be a great deal, and I'm very glad that I took his advice. Can you share some negotiation strategies that have worked for you in closing business deals? Be willing to walk away. If you're negotiating with either a lender, a seller, a broker, basically anybody, you have to be willing to walk away. Neediness is so unattractive. It positions you in a very low place on the totem pole, and you can't get what you want if you need an outcome. So you have to be willing to walk away, which is why it's so important that you do a lot of outreach and that you have a full enough pipeline so that you don't need any one lender, any one seller, or any one broker to give you what you're looking for. Same with investors. You have to have an abundance of options so that you do not get needy, because when you're needy, you cannot negotiate from a place of strength. What advice would you give to someone who's considering getting into the business buying game? Simple. Are you serious about creating wealth? Are you willing to work hard? Can you speak fairly well? And most importantly, do you have a deep desire to make a real impact for yourself and for your family and for your financial future? If you do, then sure, I can give you a ton of advice. Why don't you start with following this page, because I have a ton of insight that I can provide for you. But really, it all starts with you. Do you read, write, and speak well? Do you have a burning desire? Do you have some basic communication skills? If you have those things, we can help you be successful with buying businesses. What is the SBA and how can I help you buy a business? So the SBA is basically a government-backed financing program. It's actually specifically a government program that provides collateral to banks. And these are all fancy buzzwords that basically say it's a way for you to get great debt to buy cash flowing assets so that the cash flow of the businesses that you buy more than pays for the debt, right? So the SBA is basically government-backed financing that we can secure to buy these cash flowing businesses. And that's really the name of the game. It is a fairly technical process, but when you learn the rules of the game, you can do extremely well. By the way, the reason the SBA is great is because it provides the best debt out there. If you go to a regular lender that doesn't have this government-backed program, they'll never get you the kind of terms that you're going to get through the SBA. So that's one of the reasons we love the SBA. 10-year fully amortizing term with rates that are lower than most other commercial loans. It's great business debt. What are the first steps to take when considering buying a business with the help of the SBA? First step, we have to decide what we want to buy. Nothing can happen if we're not very clear on exactly what our buy box is. What is our investment thesis? What are we looking to buy? For us to go out there and secure a 7-figure loan and to raise equity from investors and to get brokers and sellers on board, to make this all happen, to be the owner of a 7-figure or multi-7-figure business, we have to have clarity about exactly that which we are after. Everything that is good about this process comes downstream from having that clarity, because that allows you to become an expert, to build an expert team, to communicate with clarity, and to otherwise get the results you're going to need, raising the debt, raising the equity, and finding the deal to bring this thing into fruition, into real life. What documents and information do you need to apply for an SBA loan for business acquisitions? Sure, you're going to need your tax returns. You're going to need to fill out a personal financial statement. This is where you're going to list how much cash you have, if you have real estate, if you have debt, etc. By the way, you don't need to have a lot of money to get an SBA loan. In fact, you can basically be broke, but you do need a 700 plus credit score and you can't be a felon, right? So if your credit score is 700 or better, and if you're not a felon, then you're basically good to go. But what are you going to need? You're going to need tax returns. You're going to need a personal financial statement that you're going to fill out. You're going to have to fill out a couple of forms. You're going to need to send a picture of your driver's license, basic things like that. Are there any specific industries or types of businesses that cannot be purchased with an SBA loan? Sure. We can't buy brothels. We can't buy strip clubs. We can't buy casinos. You can't buy sin businesses. So if you're trying to buy one of those sin businesses, you're going to have to get it financed in a different way. How many businesses have you bought? Personally, 5. And then I helped my gal buy one, which makes it to be 6. And then I've helped clients do dozens of deals. So personally, 6. And then my clients, dozens. What are the best online platforms for discovering businesses that are up for sale? I think it's BizBuySell. A lot of people want to argue with me and say BizBuySell doesn't have any good deals. BizBuySell is a lot like LinkedIn. It's all about how you use the tool. Most people just go on to BizBuySell, spend 20 minutes and enter in some basic information into the chat box, and they're disappointed when after 20 minutes of work, they don't have a beautiful deal at their beck and call, right? So that doesn't work. What does work is utilizing the tool that is BizBuySell by getting in contact with brokers, building meaningful relationships with these brokers, positioning yourself as a qualified buyer, and really diving into their network, into their pipeline of deals. And BizBuySell gives you access to thousands of brokers across the country in any number of industries. So I think BizBuySell is probably the very best tool out there. We use it all the time to successfully get deals done. They're not always deals that we find directly on BizBuySell, but the brokers are on BizBuySell, and then we tap into their network, and that's where the deals come from. What are some tips for conducting a successful search for a business to purchase in a specific industry or location? Well, first we have to know what we're looking for, right? That's paramount. Beyond that, we then need to make sure that when we get in contact with either a broker or a seller, we know what to say. In other words, we conduct ourselves like a professional who comes across as competent. We need to have that 30-second elevator pitch down pat. That's really the punchline. But then from there, we need to know what to ask for. We want trailing 3-year tax returns, trailing 3-year P&Ls, profit and loss statements, trailing 3-year balance sheets. And from those documents there, we can get a good sense of how much we'd be willing to pay for a business. If it's a listed deal, we also want to know what's their asking price so that we can quickly figure out whether or not this deal makes sense. But when we know our process, when we have a clear process, it's pretty easy to go through a search and to figure out whether or not a deal makes sense in a short amount of time, which is really important so that you don't waste a lot of time. What strategies can be employed for identifying businesses for sale that are not publicly listed? Off-market calls. We can just call for owners. If we have the owner's name, it makes it a lot more effective. Number 2, we can send out a mailing campaign. Number 3, we can buy an email list or a contact list with these owners and then send a targeted email blast, right? So those are 3 things we can do. And then number 4 is we can tap into pocket listings. Now these are listed deals with a broker, but they're not listed on a BizBuySell, for example. So there's a lot of way to cultivate deal flow. We can also use LinkedIn Recruiter, tacked in with a Google plugin that allows us to automate the outreach. Octopus comes to mind, Octopus AI, right? So there's a lot of different tools we can use using automation, using AI, but also using old school grassroots campaigns to cultivate real off-market deal flow. What are the legal considerations one must keep in mind when seeking investors for deals? We want to figure out where the investors are coming from and how do we come to meet the investor. This is one of the most important things about raising equity. Did we meet this investor through a network, our own network, or did we just spam investors until somebody showed interest in us? If it's in our immediate network, then we're raising equity through what's called a 501b election. And this basically means we do not need to confirm that they're an accredited investor because we have an existing relationship with them. On the other hand, if we spammed LinkedIn for 3 months to find the investor, then this is effectively raising capital through a 501c election. And in this event, we do have to confirm that they are an accredited investor. And if we don't do that, we can get in real trouble with the agencies that be, and notably the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. Now that said, I'm not a lawyer, so talk to your lawyer about this, but where we found the investor and how we got the investor interested in us is a real important consideration when raising equity. Something to think about. What blunders should be avoided when raising equity for business deals? Asking for the money right away. That's a huge mistake. Asking for the money right away is a huge mistake. You need to build a relationship with an investor before you ask for the money. You want to story tell the process of how you're searching for deals, what your deal parameters are, what deals you've passed on, why you've passed on deals. When you take your time and don't just ask for the money right away, but rather you explain how you're sourcing deals, what your criteria is, etc. This allows the investor to get comfortable with you. And then when you do finally propose an investment opportunity, it doesn't feel like a needy ask, but rather it feels like a fair value exchange where you have a great deal and they have capital that they want to put to work. And then it becomes a match made in heaven. But it's all about that patience and thinking ahead by building those relationships ahead of time. That's the key to raising equity. What financial backgrounds do people typically have before they buy a business? All types. I see people that are broke that go and buy a business. That's how I started. I see people that have a couple $100,000 in cash that go out and buy a business. I see millionaires that go out and buy businesses. And of course, there's huge family offices and private equity funds that are, extremely well capitalized that go buy bigger businesses. So there's people all across the spectrum that are doing deals. The one thing that is common amongst everybody is you have to have a base amount of credibility and credit worthiness. Credibility basically means you conduct yourself like a professional and you come across in a professional way. You seem like somebody who should be given capital to do deals, right? You have to check that box. And then the other piece is credit worthiness. In almost all cases, people who successfully buy businesses, they have a credit score of 700 plus, right? They're generally financially responsible. If you're somebody that's just had a bankruptcy 4 months ago, you're probably not a great candidate to go get 7 figures or 8 figures in debt to buy businesses. How important is the ability to innovate for individuals who buy existing businesses? It's really not as important as you might think. Look, we're buying sustainable, existing businesses that have withstood the test of time. A lot of the businesses that my clients and I buy, these are Main Street businesses. Think plumbing, think landscaping, think laundromats, think convenience stores. By all means, if we can add AI or add technology or add software to these businesses, that's great. That is a value add. And if you can innovate in a smart way, let's do it. But to be honest with you, buying businesses does not require a ton of innovation. What it requires is you buy the right business at the right price, keep the strong management in place that's hopefully there when you bought the business. And really, the bigger thing you're trying to do when you buy business is just not screw it up. You paid money for something that is profitable. Let's not get in the way of it. Can you explain the role of pitch decks in securing meetings with potential investors? How you communicate to investors is very important. And it's very important that you get to the point very quickly. How you communicate, whether it's through the written word, whether it's a 30-second phone call, if you happen to get an investor in a phone call and you just give them the punchline in 30 seconds, whether it's in-person kind of elevator pitch where you make your pitch in 30 seconds, whether it's a very short PowerPoint or a pitch deck, how exactly we're communicating is not all that important. What's important is when we get our opportunity, we get to the point and make a compelling pitch quickly. We set the hook, right? We want to bait somebody, if you will, to have enough interest to want to learn more so that we can get that time extension where maybe we only get their attention for 30 seconds, but it's like those video games you might have played when you're a kid in the arcade and you have 30 seconds, but you get through the gate and then you get a time extension, right? The 30-second elevator pitch is about getting enough interest, that time extension happens, and then they say, do you want to tell me more? And then now you have 5 minutes to explain. So whether it's a PowerPoint, the written word, in-person meeting, a phone call, that's secondary. What's most important is those first 30 seconds, get to the point and make a compelling pitch that gets the investor to want to hear more. That's the key.